I want to say, my name is Bryan, by the way, and I have the privilege of getting to lead these teams around the world, and they've just been just an incredible group, and I love them to death. But you have also been so responsive and so loving towards them this week that we've just been reflecting as a team how precious our week with you has been. So thank you for just being you to them in this week. It's been amazing. And I want to think, well, why do we play up this morning? So I want to try and create an understanding of probably one of the most famous pieces of biblical scripture that probably, even if we are not linked to church or not have any kind of a religious affiliation, somehow we heard this, we've connected with this story. And it's a psalm that is probably more used at funerals than it is at any other time of celebration. And it's known as, for our Glaswegian in the gym, there's the Scottish psalm. And that is, I don't know why that is actually. I think maybe, I'm trying to get in front of this. There you go. That's better. It's Psalm 23. Now, Psalm 23, it's always read because it seems to, have some clear defining expression about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And those are very comforting words if you are dealing with grief and dealing with loss. But actually, that verse, that little psalm is actually says way more about life than it says about death. So we'll have it on the screen. Do we have it on the screen? So we can just familiarize ourselves with it. There it is in French as well. And it says this: the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Written by David, he does something unique in the psalm that he doesn't do in any other context of some of the psalms that he has been the author of. Because like Doug, in the little clip there from the movie Up, he writes the psalm from the perspective of the animal. Because as he scripts it, he points out that the various different components of having salve for your eye, walking through scary valleys, requiring a rod and a staff to rescue them. It's the sheep that's talking. Now, I don't know if you've ever had the notion to ask, who has a dog here or a cat or? Okay, yeah. So if you could imagine asking your dog, just could you give me a bit of an appraisal of your master? Just describe to me, give me a bit of a review of how your master treats you. Now, I'm sure that those dogs will be pretty silenced pretty quickly. I don't know. Not in my house. We have a dog called Louis. He's number one in the house. Everyone else comes second to the dog. So that's okay. But, some animals may have something to say about their masters if they had the opportunity to talk, like Doug, because my master is kind and my master can do this and my master can do that. And so Psalm 23 is written from the perspective of the animal. It's the animal talking. And David is clever to write it from that first person perspective, to give us an insight into how God takes care of his people. Because you want to know, don't you, how God would treat you and how God, his posture towards you, his feeling, his regard of you. Now, the other thing to say about sheep is that they are described in the scriptures several times, maybe 30 or 40 times. They're given the description in association with human beings. We are like sheep that have gone astray. Jesus looked over Jerusalem and said, they're just like a sheep without a shepherd. Because if there's anything that gives us a little insight to our own disposition, our own character, our own set of behaviors, is that that animal, for whatever reason, seems to describe us the best. Has anyone ever been around sheep, or anyone had sheep, like taken care of sheep? See, I'm a city kid. I don't know. So we've got some people come out of agriculture and farming, and they know about sheep. I had a fight with a sheep once. And it was in the middle of the night. It's a long story. But I was in Romania, and I was staying in a very rural community, and they told us that the latrine, the toilet, the restroom, the bathroom, was outside. You have to kind of walk through the garden, and there was a wooden little cabin there, and that was the toilet. And of course, I was like holding on. I don't want to go out there. It's the middle of the night. It's pitch dark. But sure enough, had to go. I'll spare you the details of that. But I went out towards the toilet, and sure enough, there was a sheep tied to the door of the latrine. And I'm guessing the sheep tended to wander, and so somebody thought it was a really good idea to tie the sheep up to the door of the latrine. So it's 2 a.m, it's me and a sheep trying to get into... He wasn't interested in me getting inside the toilet. And so, I had a fight with this sheep. There was a lot of going on and a lot of noise going on, and it was kind of scary being inside there. And the sheep is banging the door against me. Anyway, we're getting off time. But I think one of the reasons that the sheep was tied to the door is that it just had a tendency to wander all over the garden and destroy things. He knows that about us, The tendency to wander. The tendency to go on our own pattern. In fact, it seems to be that nervousness and curiosity are the two descriptions of this animal. A combination of their both. Nervousness because they're deeply fearful characters, but also they're curious to explore new things. That's a deadly combination, isn't it? To live in fear, but also to do stupid things. And that's the best... I hate to say it, and I think God was trying to be gracious to describe as a sheep, but that's pretty much can sum up a lot of us. We do have a nervousness because we're anxious about everything, and we worry about everything. And so we're consciously living and paralyzed by this fearful disposition, alongside the fact that every now and again we get a little bit lazy and we go drifting into arenas and areas and make choices perhaps we shouldn't make. And they get us into a mess. Can anyone affirm that? Yeah. So we know what that's like. I could tell you story after story of being in that space, of being nervous, but also at times being a little lazy and making choices. Now, it seems to be the romance. I remember the first time, even in Sunday school, of hearing the story of David, and they threw, these are the days before videos, where they threw like felt pictures up on and there'd be like a picture of a sheep, and there'd be Jesus, and he'd be up in space, seemingly, and then the sheep would be down here. Nothing was in perspective whatsoever. But I remember thinking they had a little picture of David, and he was playing his harp, and there was these fluffy things all running around. And anyone who's ever been involved in agriculture probably knows that's not how it goes with agriculture. Being a shepherd was a tough job, and an intensive job, a constant set of behaviors. Now we call our pastor or leaders shepherds because they have to always be available, always be responsive. And I guess it's a good description because the shepherd really had to be on it for a number of reasons. Yes, the sheep would go astray. Yes, it would find itself getting all kinds of botfly around its eyes, so its vision was inferred, and so it couldn't see properly. Yes, it would just grow its fleece beyond measure so that it was weighed down. Yes, it would find itself going down crevices
going through the whole curiosity, nervousness thing, and ended up in places that required a staff and a hook to help that sheep out of those positions, to literally grab it around its neck and pull it back up into a position. They often would say that a shepherd would tell you that you have to keep moving sheep, because they will not just eat the grass in front of them, they will eat the very system beneath it. So they'll just keep eating until they start crunching rock. So you have to kind of move them to another place, because as much as they're curious, they're stupid. So all that going on feels like a significant description of ourselves in our posture sometimes towards God. Sometimes I felt very much like a sheep, lost, making bad choices, nervous, anxious. These are significant verses, because when it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, God's provision is always there. And yet, it says in the next one, it says that he makes me lie down. This is a profound statement, because it's very rare that you see. I've driven up and down England. There's a lot of sheep in England. And up through those country lanes throughout England, and you look on the left and on the right, and it's rare that you see a sheep lying in the pasture. They're standing. They're like, what? No, something's going to eat me. I know it. Something's going to get me. They're that nervous disposition, and so they just remain standing, fixed. So the lying down of the animal was a significant thing. The ability to get to a position with God where even in your soul and your spirit, with all the fear and anxiety of the future and sin and self and circumstance, that you can get to a point of just lying and resting in God, is a very significant statement here. He leads me beside still waters. You have to take that animal to make it drink. And we know about that whole, you got to lead an animal to drink, otherwise it won't. It'll dehydrate. So the whole job of the shepherd was a challenging role every day. No fluffy little sheep running around, playing your harp, watching these things. And then it says this. And I think this has been one of the most important verses in my life. And one of the reasons I wanted Jess to share was really around that verse. He restores my soul. Because if there's anything in this passage that best describes the nature of God towards you today, towards me today, is that he is in the business of putting you back together. His whole position towards you, whatever, and I can say this with real confidence, wherever you are in the journey, is that God looks towards you and says, I want to heal and to restore you. I want to bring all the color and all the fragrance of your life out. I want you to be the person that I wanted always you to be. And I'm going to work really hard to continue to restore you. I got to meet someone fascinating maybe 15 years ago, and he was an art restorer. It's interesting, we're here in the city of artists. But in the 15th, 16th century, there was a great absence of canvas available to the great artists. And so they did something quite unique. They would take a painting that they'd already completed that they weren't happy with, and they would paint over it another picture completely. Now, it only came to light in the 1700s that this had taken place so many times, because people could see different colors on the back of the canvas. And so they would realize that actually when a great artist found notoriety, that their work was considered very worthy, they would take the time to take off the painting that was on the top and try and reveal the painting that was below. And so there are literally people, probably right now, who their job is to restore 15th, 16th century art. And all they do, they have a tiny little scalpel, it's a micro scalpel, and little bits of chemical that they use. And they literally take one micro at a time. They lift the colors from perhaps the less worthy picture to reveal what the artist originally intended. And I love that because it kind of describes to me what God is seeking to do with your life. Because whatever sin and circumstance and self has created, it's probably marred the picture that you were supposed to become. The intent that God had for you, the potential he saw in you, has been painted over with life circumstances and bad choices. And just almost that being nudged slightly off center, finding yourself not really knowing who you are, but desiring to know what is below the surface. I think God is the God who comes to you today and says, let's lift some of those colors that are on above and see what's really behind the picture. I think God is in the restoration business. I think he wants to reveal something that he's always wanted you to be. Because I think that it could be said that many of us say, I really don't know who I am. I really don't know. I want to know. I'm anxious to know. And I would, even my posture today, my desire today would be to say, God, could you lift the marred image, the strange image I have, this thing that I don't particularly want to be, and reveal who I could be, who I might be. God has always been the God of potential. God has always been the one saying, you don't know who you are. If you could just allow me to take that surface image and let's discover who you really are. So the restoring of the soul, the intent, it seems to suggest that the intentionality of the shepherd was so profound that he was constantly trying to restore that sheep. Now, why would a shepherd want to restore a sheep? Now, I'm guessing he had food or maybe some kind of income that allowed him to look after sheep, but probably the income would come directly from the sheep itself. So in other words, the shepherd was looking after not just sheep because he liked sheep, but sheep because they were a commodity. They had value. They had something about them that he wanted to constantly pursue to restore because they were valuable to him. And if you can understand, going back to our little story about Up, is that the disposition of our God in heaven towards you is that he believes that you're valuable, that you have great, great worth. Just beyond worth, that he would be intent to seek to restore you. If you can understand this, David scripts this, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He restores my soul. He believes in me. He has value placed upon me. And that value probably is expressed in three ways. I like a good lamb chop every now and again. I actually like lamb curry, but that's another story. But, food is one of those. Certainly food is one of those byproducts, but also fleece. So there would be, in the cycle of the sheep, there'd be the ability to get good, warm fleece from this animal. And then, of course, offspring. I kind of described it as, food, family, fleece. But in three ways, that thing's going to produce. It's got value to it. And the intent of the shepherd is to make sure that that animal would produce. And that's why he will go to incredible lengths to rescue and to restore that animal. Now, in this particular case, as David describes in this passage, the restoration can take place in a number of different ways. And I want to take you through this as I close. In that intent to bring that animal to some position of restoration, he's got to cope with a number of things that may happen. And some of this you'll identify with, because sheep have a tendency to wander. They drift away, as Jess described in her setting, choices made, departure from community, away from the rest of the flock, lost, now under a certain amount of peril, because certainly in that Near East context, a wolf was always pretty much on hand, and the the animal was in extreme danger. So all these interesting insights. And there is a description that was made by a writer by the name of Philip Keller, who wrote a book called A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23. It's the most profound little book describing how a shepherd takes care of his sheep. He described a position that a sheep can find itself in that is very descriptive of our own life. He said that a sheep can go into a situation not just where it would wander and be lost away from the flock, but also can be carrying young, therefore it's heavy in its disposition, and also its fleece is also heavy. And so it's sitting there with all of this potential. It has fleece, it has offspring, and yet it still has a nervous, curious disposition. And it wanders off away from the flock, and it finds itself away from the entire flock in a position where one or two little choices can put it in the most dangerous place you can imagine. Because of the heaviness and tiredness of carrying that weight, the sheep will lay down, but because of the imbalance of the sheep, will literally turn upside down. That kind of seems funny with its legs all in the air. But in that position, that sheep, known as being cast, the cast sheep finds itself now in the most dangerous place it could be. The access of a wild animal, just the blood draining from its feet, sitting there, incredibly vulnerable, now finds itself in its most dangerous place. It's interesting that Jess touched on something, and I guess this is the same for all of us, because even in my own life, my observation of working with young people and working as I think about my own story, that, oftentimes being in the most incredible area of potential, the most high potential season of life, I didn't know I was 1 millimeter away from the most danger in my life. And all it needed was just the sheep didn't go outside there, I'm going to go get fat, I'm going to go lie outside and stick my feet in the air, and it's going to be great. It was a simple set of choices that it made. And in one little choice, the twist of the neck, the imbalance for the animal finds itself in this very vulnerable place. I would say to you, as my observation of 40 years of kind of Christian behavior, sometimes when you're in the highest moment of potential in your life, you're also in the highest moment of danger. You could be one neck twist away from being in the most dangerous place you could be. And I would say that that's probably the devil, very much involved, always seeking the sheep as well, that you can find yourself, hey, I'm full of there's so much opportunity before me. There's so many things I want to do and I want to be. But in a moment, you find yourself in the most critical place of danger, lost, away from it all. Have you ever felt cast spiritually? Have you ever felt, for anyone in the room here, I don't know what's going on, but I just feel stuck. Jess used the word stuck. I was pleased that she did. Feel stuck today? Feel like you're just away from it all, just on the fringe? Maybe there's potential in your life, but you're away from this movement of God. You're away from all that He wants to do in and through you. You're here, but you're not really here. You're kind of lost. You're kind of cast. And you're desperate for some kind of hope. But all you can see right now is danger and fear and anxiety, and time is ticking. Anyone feeling spiritually cast today? There's 3 things the shepherd does to an animal like that. First of all, he finds him. And I love the fact that we have a God that seeks us, that comes after us, comes looking for us, comes pursuing us. Yeah, and here's the thing: whatever you remember from this talk today is that God is looking for you. He is seeking you, and he is pursuing you with a love and a desire, what? To restore you. He's in the restoration business. And so the shepherd comes to that animal, and he does three things. The first thing he does is he removes. He takes that shear, that knife, didn't have electronics back then, and cuts away that fleece. Because the fleece is now matted into the grassland, and it can't get it off, so it has to cut everything away. Here's the first thing I learned about God when he was trying to restore me and bring me back to himself. He took some things out of my life. He removed some things. He said, that's not good for you. And the only way I can restore you to my purpose and your potential is that some things have got to go. Some of us in the room today, you know there's some things in your life that's just got to go. They're not helpful. They're unhelpful to you. And they put you in a position of danger, and they put you outside of the flock, even though you may be doing all the things that seem to indicate that you're part of it all. What does he need to remove? What are the things that he points to by his Holy Spirit that says, hey, there's some things that they're unhelpful to you. Then the second thing is, and this is even more dramatic, is often when an animal is straying and is constantly in that kind of behavior, which we can also, recognize as well, is that he will take that animal and it's even hard to think about this as a good practice, and yet in the Near East, in that region, it was the right thing to do, because he would take one of the back legs of that sheep and twist that back leg until it cracks and literally break its leg. Now, he knows a few things, the shepherd. He knows it takes 4 to 6 weeks before that sheep can properly walk again. But he also knows, in his commitment, and this is the kind of God that you and I have. You've seen the images of then that sheep being placed on the shoulders of the shepherd, holding that sheep. And that shepherd would then hold that sheep for 5 weeks to restore it back to the flock. That was a commitment to the one sheep. Not just all of them, just the one. His pursuit after you, not just to imagine that you could be part of the flock again, but to restore you individually with such intentionality, with such sacrifice. Because isn't it the truth that the God who sacrificed gave himself for you to restore you to himself? And literally, he will walk around with that sheep on his shoulder for weeks on end, keep putting it down, letting it walk a little bit, pick it up, let it walk a little bit, let it walk a little bit, until the day comes where not only does he remove, not only does he restrict, but he restores. And that sheep is put down, and whatever this is, and in the book, when I read this, I got teared up a little bit, is that because the sheep has spent so much time with the smell and the sound and the hearing of the heart of the shepherd, have a guess which sheep stays closest to the leg of the shepherd when he walks with the rest of the sheep. They will almost say that sheep will almost dance with the shepherd because it wants to be listening to its voice, because it spent 5 weeks doing it in close proximity, and it wants to be wherever the shepherd wants to be. That is the story of God right there. A God who sees his people astray, nervous, making bad choices, curious, restored through the removal of things in our life sometimes, through the restriction of our time. Sometimes he just needs to restrict us. He needs to just, I need to just put you in this space. It's an interesting verse because it says, I will walk at liberty if I keep thy commandments. He says it in another part of the Psalms. And he says, well, what is true freedom? Freedom sometimes is within the barrier that God has laid out. When God says, these are my commandments, stay in there because you're free here. Go beyond there, you lose your freedom. Isn't that interesting? We think freedom is like, I'm out of here. But actually, freedom is found within the boundary that God has laid for you. Don't ever forget that. The boundaries that he's laid down is where freedom lies. He removes, he restricts, but he ultimately restores. He's an amazing God. And then that little verse, that one little phrase, here is so much packed into that verse. Here's a God who loves to put us back together. I don't know where you are in your journey today. I don't know if you find yourself wondering, fearful, nervous, lost, cast, whatever these terms mean to you in your journey of faith today. I want to tell you that there's a God, a shepherd, who loves you so much. And he loves to put you back together. And he loves his commitment to restore you to the kind of people that he would have you be. Let's just bow our heads for a moment if we could, yeah? All of us, that would be great. I'm going to ask Johnny to come up here and just actually sing a song over us. And the words of the song, I guess, will speak. It's all about recovery. And then I'll get up and say a few things in a moment. But why don't we just, instead of just listening to the song, just allow it, even in a prayerful way, just allow the words to speak to us today. Thanks, Johnny.
There was a light that found me in darkness, failing and hopeless, barely alive. And for the first time, I saw your perfection in my reflection, there in your eyes. My feet are on the ground, my heart is beating now. Your love has shown me how to live. You're my recovery, changing who I was to who I'm meant to be. Healing all that's broken as you wash me clean. Oh, you set me free. You're my recovery, my recovery. This is the day I'm starting over. I'm taking it slower, one step at a time, and narrow the way. But you're here to guide me, your spirit's inside me, and it's changing my mind. My feet are on the ground, my heart is beating now. Your love has shown me how to live. You're my recovery, changing who I was to who I'm meant to be. Healing all that's broken as you wash me clean. Oh, you set me free. You're my recovery, my recovery. Clear eyes, now I can see your truth in front of me. I am and always will be loved. You're my recovery, changing who I was, who I'm meant to be. Healing all that's broken as you wash me clean. Oh, you set me free. You're my recovery. You're
just while we just continue with our head bowed. I don't often do this, but I'll do this today. And I won't embarrass anybody, but if there's a life in here and you are just something by God's Spirit has spoken to you today, you may be in a position where there's some fear, there's some nervousness, perhaps there's some unhealthy curiosity in your life. Others here know that there needs to be some things that need to be perhaps removed. Others perhaps would say, Lord, I need some restriction. I need to hear your heart again. I need some alone time with you. Some of us are even just saying, I need to know the shepherd. I need to be restored. I need to discover the image beneath the surface. I'm longing to know who I am. Whatever it is, I won't ask you to come forward or anything like that, but just in this quietness while every head is bowed, if you don't mind. If you're like that today, and you're just dealing with one of these things, there's one or two in my life I would stand for, but I'm going to invite you just for a moment, just to stand to your feet. Just say, it's me and God, and I'm saying to him that today something's got to change. Just as Johnny continues to sing quietly, I invite you to stand and have that time with God. That's all I'll ask today, just for you to just stand where you are as the Spirit of God would speak to you. You can do that now if you want to.
You're my recovery, changing who I was, who I meant to be. Healing all that's broken as you watch me clean. Oh, you set me free. You're my recovery, my recovery.
It's wonderful. You can be seated. That's great. Father, thank you for your word. Thanks for the great hope that we have in you as our shepherd, as our lead, as our guide. Come and fill every life with your Spirit. I pray for those today who say, yeah, I so connect with this story, but I really don't know Jesus, and I long to know him. I long to know that shepherd in my life. And even in your heart today, it's a discovery moment. It's a prayer of commitment in the quietness of your own heart. Thanks for our time today and for the joy of being with your people. Bless us into this rest of the day. And everybody said, amen.